hello. This is Tribal Knowledge with Torry. We're going over some basics on an autoclave. So today we came in and we had a report for the work orders saying that we had a leak coming from the autoclave. So when you're doing work orders, please be more descriptive, but luckily the client was here today and we were able to talk to him about the leak. The leak was coming from right up here, and the leak was coming between this metal machine faceplate and this gasket seal that exists right here. So when we noticed the leak was coming from up there, you're always going to want to try to put in low input, high reward solutions. So one of the low input, high reward solutions would be to go ahead and remove this gasket. So this gasket is nice and wide. You can have gasket picks for narrow ones, but we don't need it for this one. So we'll go ahead and pull it out of these corners. Okay. Once we remove the gasket, the first thing we want to do is inspect the full length of the gasket. So as I did my inspection on the full length of the gasket, I'm looking for rips, tears, anything that looks out of the normal. It should all stay that continuous silicone smoothness, and then that's going to be your one joint that you'll see where the gasket was actually adhered together from the manufacturer, so don't worry too much about that. This is kind of a different gasket too because it's actually square, not circular, so that's what the ripples are coming from in the corner, is the compression in these corners. Once we had determined that the gasket had no rips or tears in it, we're going to go ahead and grab a little bit of 70% IPA. The cool part about 70% IPA and like EDPM or silicone or anything like that is the 70% isopropyl alcohol will actually cause your silicone or EDPM to contract. So if your gasket, because it's been sitting here stretched inside the groove for so long, if you actually need it to contract a little bit to gain your sealing surface back, this will give you just a little bit. It's not going to change it much, and it's not going to cause it to not fit. So what I generally do is I'll generally go ahead and spray my paper towel. You can use pig mats, no lint wipes. Luckily, I'm just in a lab, so my sterility and breaching sterility on this thing really isn't a big deal. And if I leave behind just a little bit of lint, I'm still not too worried about it. It's a pretty strong seal up here on these joints, so it should be able to close and compress with it. We're just trying to make sure that we don't have any residuals. Remember, medias and all kinds of things get decontaminated in this. So you could have something built up on this thing, preventing it to actually seal between here and here. Once we go ahead and clean off the gasket, the next place I'm going to is right here in this channel. So I'm not too worried about spraying directly on the stainless steel, so I go ahead and hit it with a couple sprays. Go ahead and be liberal with your use of the IPA. Give it a good little scrub on inside of that gasket. When you get that cleaned out right there, now you're ensuring that the gasket can backseat. Another thing is inspect your channel. Look for pitting, cracks, anything going on inside this channel, because this is going to be one of your main sealing surfaces, this actual channel right here. So I gave it a good solid inspection. I didn't see anything too wild. Now we're ready to reinstall the gasket. Sometimes they can be fidgety, sometimes they won't. Remember how I told you the ripples are in the corners? So what I wanted to do is since I knew it was leaking from the top, I wanted to begin to reinstall the gasket up here from the top. Now it's fighting me just a little bit, so generally when it fights me a little bit, I'll give a little bit of isopropyl alcohol, and I use that as a lubricant so it can seat and roll smoothly for you. So I'm trying to get it to seat, and you'll feel it compress all the way against the back of it. Now you're going to want to come and you're going to want to do it from this side too. So when I was compressing this in and putting it back in, what I noticed is that the gasket was just a little bit too big, and you see these wrinkles we got going on right here? So where I want that to exist at is in those corners. So I'll equally press out right here because that's your big surface face. And then I was going to equally compress up here. And like I said, alcohol will be your lubricant to allow your gloves and everything to flow smoothly across the gasket. So then I was able to compress that out. And this corner is where it's meant to actually eat up the slack at. You don't want any slack up here on the actual straight surfaces. So just like that, I got it fully compressed and put in the way I wanted it to get put in. Cool. So I went ahead, went through that. The next thing is this actual machine surface right here. So we come to this machine surface right here, and if we give the camera a chance to focus, you'll actually be able to see where that gasket's been riding at. So there's a light, faint line from where the gasket's been riding at. It was way more visible before I cleaned it the first time for the repair. But where you see that faint line at is where you're going to go ahead and put a little bit more isopropyl alcohol, and you take a Scotch-Brite pad. Just a regular Scotch-Brite, nothing crazy. And remember, you don't want to put a bunch of force in when you're scrubbing with a Scotch-Brite pad. You're only trying to remove surface. You're not actually trying to change the metal. So I come here and I rub lightly with it around in a circle. And any spot I saw that was a little more or a little less, where it was built up or not built up, I was just trying to ensure that the residue was actually removed. You're always going to see a faint print of it due to the torque between this and the faceplate. But you're just trying to make sure that there's no material left from all the medias and everything else that's being deconned inside of this machine. Once that's done, take your regular cloth that we've been using, I dry it off, and the beautiful part about isopropyl alcohol is it will evaporate quickly. So now we have our surface back. Okay, so I ran into a bit of an issue, but this is just in case you're ever working on it. So I went ahead, did my simple fix, locked the door, and then when I locked the door, I was just trying to see if I could replicate the issue. And if we come up here with my screwdriver, I'll be able to show you what was going on. But from right here, it was leaking because this part of the door was compressed more and this part of the door was compressed more open. But I wasn't able to actually troubleshoot that issue until I ran it through its first cycle. So don't be scared to run one cycle through the autoclave so you can replicate the result of what the report was when you came out to fulfill your work order. Well, when I went ahead and aborted the phase, I came into a real problem with this autoclave. And some of you may have it a little different than I do, and you might actually have a drain set up on back. But if you're stuck like me, what you're going to end up is the chamber is going to be full of water, and the valve to actually drain it is way back here, and it's very inaccessible and it's hard to work with. So what I went ahead and did is we remove this rack, and when you remove this rack, that gives you room to work with it. And now you can see how the chamber is full of water. So what I did when the chamber was full of water is I got myself a small piece of silicone tubing. Any tubing will work, and quality of the tubing, you just want it to be good, clean, usable tubing. Then what I did is I filled up the tubing with water, and that allowed me to begin my siphon. So you can run it underneath the sink, you can fill it up with a beaker, whatever your personal preference is. There we go. Now I got it good and full. So completely filled. Make sure this side is actually submerged in the water, and then drop it down. And then you can begin actually siphoning out the chamber. So some people use special siphon pumps. You'll see hand pumps. I've seen people suck it to start it before with their mouth so they can get it going. This has been the simplest and most effective way I've done so far. Then you just let it run. Okay, now that we got the machine drained out, which not too bad of a time-consuming process, we troubleshooted it, ran the machine, it filled up with water. When it filled up with water, we canceled the phase, and when we canceled the phase, we were able to open it up. But when it was running, we were actually able to simulate the leak again. The leak was simulated because we were getting steam out of here. Well, what that's doing is that's telling me that the door is, and as I look down on it, I can see the door, and it's pinching harder against this face and softer against this face. Well, since there's two mechanical lug pins that'll go through these bolt holes and pull it closer to the face, that lets me know that this bolt right here is what needed to be adjusted. So to adjust the bolt, I went ahead and grabbed, and you can use a punch or anything straight. What I had on hand that day was a screwdriver, and I know a mechanic or adjustable wrench isn't best, but that's what we're using. So what you need to do is you need to break the lock open. So by maintaining it in here and turning this, you're able to break that lug lock free. I didn't break it very far free though, because I didn't want to lose my spacing from the manufacturer. Once it's like this, if we thread it clockwise and in, you'll shorten the lug length. By shortening the lug length, you cause the door to compress more. So I did it I knew we could go again. So the first time I went 180 degrees, then I did 360 degrees, which is one complete turn. Once I made my complete turn, what I started to inspect for, you got to come up here, and as you're looking down on it, these holes, they have to line up perfectly together. So this hole and that hole have to line up perfectly together. So I'm sighting down it, making sure they're locking together. I get my wrench back out, and that's what this locking bolt is for. So you get your wrench over the locking bolt, you get your screwdriver back in to maintain your direction on it, then you go ahead and tighten down your locking bolt. So I get that tightened down. I check it one last time, and I still have a little bit of movement left in it. And by going backwards this way, I'm tightening the locking bolt up even more snug. Now I know I got a firm connection. Once I have my firm connection, we'll go ahead and push it in the machine, and then we can see if the machine auto-locks and grabs it. Now the machine's auto-locked and grabbed it, I went ahead and inspected and sighted down my top sight. Now I have an even compression all the way across the top, instead of that bowed compression I had out, where I had it way too far out in the front of the door. So, in the overall synopsis, this machine was considered broken and unusable, and all it needed was a small adjustment on the front door. And by doing that small adjustment, we got our equipment back into operation. So I hope you all have a wonderful day, and sign back in next time.